Welcome to episode 2 of the P2P Connects Us podcast. Today is September 21st, 2014, and I'm your host, John Light. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Uber's new political strategy, California Public Utilities Commission's ire with transportation network companies, BitTorrent opens Bleep Alpha to the public, the Ripple versus Stellar debate, and last but certainly not least, sharepreneur Chelsea Rustrom joins the show to tell us about life in the sharing economy. Hello, and welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, to the P2P Connects Us podcast. This is the second episode, technically the third if you count the pilot episode, and I want to thank you so much for tuning in to listen today when you could be doing anything else with the next 40 minutes of your life. I had a really amazing day today. I spent my morning at the SF Bitcoin Devs meetup, where they have been hacking on Dark Wallet and OpenBazaar, trying to integrate Dark Wallet's privacy and security features into the OpenBazaar program so that it's easy to conduct business securely while maintaining personal privacy. I'll put a link to the GitHub repo in the show notes if you want to follow along or dive in and contribute. As mentioned in the last episode, I'll be speaking at Coins in the Kingdom, a cryptocurrency-focused conference that's being held in Orlando, Florida from October 4th through October 6th. Tickets are only $60, kids 12 and under get in free, and there will be family activities planned, so if you're interested in attending, you can check out the conference schedule and buy your tickets at coinsinthekingdom.com. And yes, they do accept Bitcoin. I mentioned in the last episode that I was going to begin taking offers for sponsorships for the P2P Connects Us podcast, and I am happy to announce that the P2P Connects Us sponsor token has been created and can now be bid on at auction.letstalkbitcoin.com. The auction goes until September 26, 2014 and will be repeated weekly, at least until the show goes off the air. I just got the auction running yesterday and no bids have been placed yet, so if you have a P2P project, want to give a shout out to a P2P project you like, or just want to support the show, head on over to the LTB auctioneer page and make your bid. Again, that URL is auction.letstalkbitcoin.com. With those announcements out of the way, it's time for the news. Today's top story comes to us from a number of different sources, and the topic at hand here is Uber's new political strategy. You may have recently heard that Uber has hired former Obama advisor and campaign strategist David Plouffe, who Uber CEO Travis Kalanick recently said in a blog post would be, quote, overseeing global policy, communications, and branding at Uber, unquote. Well, it appears that some of Uber's grassroots supporters are taking umbrage with the fact that Uber's latest branding move seems to be cozying up to the military-industrial complex. That's right. Pando.com recently reported that Uber was the platinum sponsor of a, quote, police militarization convention called Urban Shield in Oakland, California. At the convention, they had on display militarized police gear, which they were also selling to convention goers, and were conducting special operations and disaster response training on site. In a related story, although perhaps much less controversial, Uber teamed up with Hiring Our Heroes to bring up to 50,000 veterans into their stable of drivers. In a report from CBSNews.com, former Defense Secretary Robert Gates says, quote, the reason companies like Uber want vets is because of the qualities that vets bring to the workplace. They're disciplined, they're team players, they're easily trainable, they're flexible, they're loyal, and they're reliable, unquote. It seems that their recent sponsoring of this Urban Shield conference might have been them extending an olive branch to the military-industrial complex community so that maybe they could attract not only more veteran drivers, but also more military, veteran law enforcement personnel and supporters to actually use their service. It's certainly an interesting play. It appears that Uber is alienating their freedom-loving base with this move to sponsor the Urban Shield convention, which I can confirm anecdotally is the effect here based on a tweet that I saw from Twitter user and EFF activist at April Laser, who said, quote, "One of the sponsors of the Urban Shield Cop Military Gear Convention is at Uber, boycotting now," unquote. Instead of embracing their freedom-loving base, it appears that Uber is really trying to appeal to a more broad, mainstream conservative audience. As I said, people who might be supporters of law enforcement and military and veterans. And while the Pando Daily article I referenced earlier calls Uber, quote, libertarian, given that their CEO is an Ayn Rand fan, it would actually be more accurate to call them objectivist. People of the press, allow me to make this abundantly clear. You heard it right here, folks. Objectivists are not libertarians. Ayn Rand herself is on record saying, quote, "Libertarians are a monstrous, disgusting bunch of people," unquote. Not exactly a fan of libertarianism. So please, 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 tech press and the general blogosphere out there, do not conflate objectivism with libertarianism. Any self-described, self-respecting libertarian who cares about their reputation would not want to be associated with the kind of militarized police tactics that have been on display during such events as the Hurricane Katrina aftermath, the Boston Marathon bombing aftermath, and most recently, the Ferguson police shooting demonstrations aftermath. However, it is fully within the boundaries of objectivist philosophy to support a strong night watchman state as advocated by Ayn Rand, including military and law enforcement. Given this insight, this move towards a more politicized Uber is not really surprising. It seems like a combination defensive and offensive strategy to get enough of the respectable members of the public to support them so that attacking their business model becomes politically unfeasible. In any case, Uber is clearly not afraid to crack a few eggs to make an omelet. Also here in California, the California Public Utilities Commission Safety Enforcement Director has sent letters to Uber, Lyft, and Sidecar, all different ride-sharing services, informing them that their new carpooling services are illegal. The letter states that the companies, quote, "have not yet approached the commission regarding the new service, nor submitted a request to modify the existing permit as a transportation network company to provide services under a different business model," unquote. And goes on to say that the services violate Public Utilities Code Section 5401, which prohibits a charter party carrier from charging customers on an individual basis. This after a similar letter sent out in June in which the CPUC president expressed, quote, "personal disappointment and concern," unquote, about the services offered by these companies. The California Public Utilities Commission, in concert with the California State Legislature, has created a whole new category for these ride-sharing companies called transportation network companies. And the regulations that they wrote are already obsolete. It's incredible. The letter says, "The Commission lacks the flexibility to allow a transportation service that is contrary to the statute as approved by the legislature. If the companies believe that the PU code is outdated, it may petition the legislature for a modification. Unless and until the legislature modifies Section 5401, the Commission must enforce state law." incredible. This new category was only just created like a year ago, and it's already outdated. This is your society on statism. Can't go more than a few months without a carpooling service being deemed illegal, and companies which facilitate such a service in a safe and efficient manner being told to stop what they're doing or else face enforcement from their friendly neighborhood safety enforcement director. I'd just like to take this opportunity to express my personal disappointment and concern that here in California, we have a government which claims the monopoly right to control what kind of businesses people can run or what kind of cars people are allowed to get in and out of. On top of that, what restrictive policies the government does pass are outdated in less than a year. Speaking of personal disappointment, BitTorrent recently opened their Bleep Alpha application to the public. That's right, the Bleep P2P end-to-end encrypted chat application, which was previously in private alpha, has now been open to the public as a public alpha. And I started the story off by mentioning personal disappointment because, unfortunately, like other recent BitTorrent apps, Bleep is proprietary. Womp womp womp. That's right. They have released this application closed source. So they say it's end-to-end encrypted. Who knows? They say it's P2P. Who knows? All we can do is trust them, right? I mean, you could watch your traffic using a tool like Wireshark and see if the traffic is actually encrypted, but even if it is, it doesn't mean that it's end-to-end. It doesn't mean that BitTorrent doesn't have the decryption key. We have no idea because the app is closed source. If you're interested in using an end-to-end encrypted chat application, there are a couple alternatives that I can recommend, but they use servers, so they're not P2P. Nonetheless, they are very good apps. One is called TextSecure for Android. This was developed by OpenWhisper. They also have an app called Signal, which is compatible with TextSecure, and that's being developed for iOS, and I believe they will eventually merge TextSecure for Android into Signal and create a unified Signal application for Android and iOS. And there's also ChatSecure by the Guardian Project, which is also end-to-end encrypted, and I believe it also implements OTR, which is off-the-record messaging, which uses perfect forward secrecy. And those are all open source alternatives to this Bleep Alpha. Nonetheless, if you're interested in peer-to-peer stuff and you want to play with this, you can find it. Just do a web search for a BitTorrent Bleep Alpha. You'll be able to find it online. And our last story tonight comes straight to us from the Stellar Foundation, who has reported that they have experienced a network outage lasting over 10 hours long. After multiple comments surfaced on the Stellar community forums, Stellar representatives have come out and said that they indeed have experienced a full network outage, meaning that people were unable to send money to each other for over 10 hours using the Stellar network. And I'd like to get into a little bit of a story here, as requested by a listener of the P2P Connects Us podcast. For those of you who don't know, and perhaps some of you who do, Stellar is a fork of the Ripple network, which we discussed in the last episode when we interviewed the chief cryptographer of Ripple Labs, David Schwartz. A fork basically just means that somebody took the source code for Ripple and then changed it to make a new network. And this particular fork is called Stellar. There's a bit of a backstory here. So get your popcorn ready. Let's dig in. As we discussed in the last episode, the Ripple protocol is developed by a company called Ripple Labs. Ripple Labs used to be called OpenCoin Inc. and was founded by Jed McCaleb, Arthur Brito, and Chris Larsen. Before OpenCoin Inc. was incorporated, these individuals launched an early version of the Ripple network that I believe was called NewCoin at the time, and created for themselves 100 billion tokens that would be needed to use this new network. Since there was no mining as part of this network like Bitcoin has, all of these tokens had to be created up front and were then the property of the founders, Jed, Arthur, and Chris. After OpenCoin Inc. was incorporated, the founders gifted 80 billion XRP to the new corporation, which the corporation is now using to promote the network, do giveaways to businesses and developers and charities and other people who are adding value to the network, and is keeping a portion of the XRP for the corporation to fund its operations. The remaining 20 billion XRP was kept by the founders and distributed amongst themselves. Jed McCaleb got 9 billion, Chris Larsen got 7 billion, and Arthur Brito got 4 billion. Earlier this year, towards the end of May, Jed announced that he was going to sell all of his XRP and permanently distance himself from Ripple Labs and the Ripple community. This caused the price of XRP to temporarily take a nosedive, but Ripple Labs ultimately came to an agreement which would lock up Jed's XRP and only allow him to sell a little bit at a time so as not to crash the market. Chris Larsen, Ripple Labs' current CEO and co-founder, has agreed to give his portion of the XRP, that 7 billion XRP, to a charity which is focused on increasing access to financial services for the unbanked and underbanked populations of the world. No word yet on what Arthur Brito is going to do with his 4 billion XRP, although I'm sure it will eventually get put towards a good cause. Jed took all of the ideas that he had for Ripple originally and has applied them to a new project, which for a while people only knew as the Secret Bitcoin Project. Well, sometime in, I believe it was either June or July, he finally announced what it was exactly that he was going to be doing, and that is the Stellar Project. Stellar is a fork of Ripple, as I mentioned earlier. He basically copied the code. Remember, this is all open source, so anybody can copy it and modify it. He took the code, copied it, changed the name to Stellar, and changed some of the parameters, similar to the way that altcoins change some of Bitcoin's parameters and call themselves Litecoin. Well, now we have Stellar. And as I mentioned, where Ripple is developed and maintained by a for-profit corporation called Ripple Labs, formerly known as OpenCoin, Stellar is being stewarded by a nonprofit foundation called the Stellar Foundation. Jed McCaleb is a board member along with several other prominent individuals. He has brought on a full development team community manager, several international people to help internationalize the network. And the strategy for Stellar to get rid of all of their Stellar tokens, which were also pre-generated, is to give them away through social verification and nonprofits that are formed for the purpose of providing increased access to financial services to the and underbanked of the world. So a lot like Ripple, but with a nonprofit at the helm rather than a for-profit corporation. There were some other changes made as well. In the Stellar protocol, there's actually 1% annual inflation of the Stellar tokens, whereas Ripple has a purely deflationary asset called XRP. There's only 100 billion XRP that will ever exist at most, and these XRP are constantly being destroyed, so there's actually less than that right now, and there will continue to be less and less as more XRP is burned to pay transaction fees on the network. So as I said, Stellar actually has 1% inflation built into it, and every week people who use the Stellar network can vote on where they want new Stellars to go. The default is set to the Stellar Foundation, so they've probably been getting a majority of the inflation till now. But it's envisioned that as time goes on, people will be voting on other worthy organizations to receive some portion of the Stellar inflation. I believe the way that they have it set up is that the top 50 accounts that have been voted on, which have over 1.5% of the coins voting for them, will be the recipients of the new inflation coins. And if no account has over 1.5% of the vote, then the network will just take the top 50 voted for as the inflation recipients. That is from the Stellar Wiki. I believe Stellar has also removed some features that Ripple built in for purposes of regulatory compliance, such as the authorized accounts feature, which allows gateways to control what accounts on the network are actually allowed to hold their balances. So this is to prevent bad actors from interacting with legitimate gateways and gateway customers. I'm not for sure about that because documentation of Stellar is somewhat sparse right now, but that's what I was told by somebody who is familiar with the Stellar network. If anyone wants to correct me on that, please send me a message through my website or leave me a comment on the post for this episode. To sum it up, the differences between Ripple and Stellar: the teams of individuals who are working on the protocols are obviously different. Stellar is being stewarded by a nonprofit foundation. Ripple is being stewarded by a for-profit corporation. Stellar has an inflationary currency called Stellars. Ripple has a deflationary currency called Ripples. Stellar might be a bit more bare bones in its functionality. Ripple has features that they built in on the advice of a Promontory Financial Group and their regulatory compliance team to help make the protocol usable by traditional financial institutions. And the distribution mechanisms are different as well. Early on, Ripple Labs was a little bit lax with its giveaway policies. They have since tightened things up a bit. They still give away XRP to developers and businesses and users of the network, but Stellar has taken a much more direct approach, allowing people to basically create a Stellar wallet and then use their Facebook account to authenticate and verify their identity and then receive some Stellars in return. They had some trouble with this distribution mechanism. Early on, some people were using the Amazon Mechanical Turks service to pay people around $1 to receive what at the time was around $20 worth of Stellars. Pretty incredible. Over 1 or 2 million Stellars were basically cheated from the system this way. And after they fixed that to make it so that less Stellars were earned kind of up front for authenticating with Facebook, somebody figured out how to actually hack the Facebook authentication itself to allow them to use OAuth multiple times to authenticate and get a ton of these Stellar tokens just by exploiting this bug in the OAuth system. I don't know if this was a bug on Stellar's implementation of OAuth or whether it was a bug generally speaking in OAuth, but it was probably a Stellar specific bug. They were able to authenticate multiple times in a row and get, I believe it was also millions of Stellars yet again for this exploit. So they've had a little bit of a bumpy road. Ripple also had a similar not so perfect experience with their distribution through the Computing for Good program, which was originally intended to allow people to participate in a world computing grid project, which is a lot like folding at home, where you're using your computer to solve scientific problems and you get rewarded with points, and you would turn those points into XRP. Well, Ripple Labs found that most of the XRP was going to a very small proportion of users in the network who basically set up these huge computer rigs to mine a ton of these world community grid points and exchange them for the tokens. So they stopped that program and have since shifted to a more straightforward giveaway program. Most recently, they partnered with a Ripple gateway in Europe called SnapSwap to do 5% cash back on a Ripple connected debit card. So people can load cash onto this debit card from their Ripple wallet, and then they get 5% XRP back rewards for all of the money they spend with the card. And that's a really interesting distribution mechanism, since you've basically proven the customer's identity when they sign up for the gateway and then the card, and then all of the purchases are verifiable. So it's a bit more of a hurdle for people to get over in order to participate in this particular distribution program, but it's probably much less prone to gaming the way that the earlier Computing for Good program was gamed, and the way that Stellar's Facebook authentication program has been gamed. So really just looking forward to innovation from both of these development teams. Even though the split up between Jed McCaleb and Ripple Labs certainly seemed very dramatic from the outside, I think that the communities themselves can still get along and learn from each other. And since this is all open source software, anything good that Stellar ends up implementing in their protocol could be implemented in Ripple and vice versa. So ultimately, with the kind of environment that we're in here, this open source, open innovation environment, a rising tide will raise all ships. And I'm looking forward to success from either of these protocols, because as an end user, I just want to use the best technology that's out there. So may the best protocol win. Today, I would like to welcome to the P2P Connects Us podcast, Chelsea Rustrom, a sharepreneur from San Francisco, co-creator of the documentary One Couch at a Time, co-organizer of the Shares of San Francisco meetup, and co-author of It's a Shareable Life. Chelsea, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So Chelsea, how did you first get interested in peer-to-peer?
I guess I first became interested a number of things. The first one was co-working, and none of this stuff was necessarily called peer-to-peer, or at least I didn't know if it was. So the very first experience I had with a community was through co-working in Santa Cruz at one of the very first co-working spaces called Next Space. And then eventually I traveled on my own and I discovered couch surfing and I started hosting people, and then I went on a solo trip and met people all over the world and experienced their generosity and really became interested in how online, offline networks and communities could interact. And then I started seeing the greater picture and wanting to tell the story of couch surfing to more people because I had such a beautiful experience with it. And I ended up meeting a girl who's doing a documentary about it and asked her how I could help. And around that same time, I started seeing all of these parallels and connections to different ways to share your time, stuff, space, energy, and really started kind of diving into that and researching it. And upon returning from helping with the documentary, I started sharing my car and my home and having all sorts of, I guess we call them sharing experiments, and found how it completely transformed my life, and started sharing that with my friends who then started doing the same thing. And then once again came to this place where I wanted to tell more people, and we all wanted to tell more people. So we decided to write a book called It's a Shareable Life, which is a practical guide to the sharing economy, which is, I'm holding it in my hand right now. And it's about to be published. So I'm really excited. 2.5 years later, this is coming to fruition. So
That's really awesome. So for people who might not be familiar with the term, could you enlighten us as to what exactly a co-working space is?
Yeah, a co-working space is a space where entrepreneurs, freelancers, consultants, depending on the space, like there's different types of people, they work out of a space and rent the space, but it's also typically a community where people can help each other on whatever they're working on. And there's often a open space like that is frequently referred to as a cafe, where there's couches and tables and breakout spaces, and sometimes like meeting rooms and things like that, where people can just sit and work in a more open environment. And then there are often offices that people can rent separately as well.
Cool. So not only can they be working on their own projects, but because they're all in the same place, they can also collaborate when necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, it actually does this really interesting thing that I call, I mean, it's a lot of people call it's basically a machine for accelerating and serendipity. So it's pretty cool.
Accelerating serendipity. I like that.
Yeah.
People can watch the documentary, I guess, if they really want to learn a lot of the details and see what it was like. But could you describe for us a little bit what it was like couch surfing and first getting into that? Was it strange to meet with strangers and sleep on their couches or airbeds? And did you ever have a bad experience? Or what was that like?
So at the beginning, I knew I was going to be traveling to Italy, and a friend of mine had suggested couch surfing, and I had said, no, I'm not going to do that. That sounds like a little weird. I'll try it. And since I knew I was going to be traveling, I decided to start hosting before I was hosted, which means I had guests come and stay with me. So I created my profile on couch surfing, and then a few different people stayed with me, and it was great. I mean, one guy came and we did a yoga class together, and we went running, and he was from France, and he did all kinds of interesting work in yeah, and I forget exactly what he did, but it was great. And then I had a girl who I lived in Santa Cruz at the time. She was in Santa Cruz to surf, and I picked her up, and we had a great time. And it wasn't as fear-provoking as I would have thought, and it was very connective. But that was just the beginning. Then once I started traveling, I was a little bit hesitant to stay with people, and I kind of pushed through that barrier anyway. There's this really great feature on Couchsurfing where you can see who's nearby, and you can participate in group events. So I did a lot of that. I actually ended up meeting a lot of people through group events and not necessarily Couchsurfing. I did have one experience in Italy where it was not ideal, but I don't know. That could happen anywhere in any circumstance. So it wasn't something that dissuaded me from continuing because I had so many other great, incredible experiences that, speak 5 languages and, could tell me about whatever and like locals that could show me around. And yeah, just it's very, very, very connective. So I hope that answers the question.
Definitely. Thanks a lot for sharing that. People can have a bad experience, I guess, in any kind of travel scenario, whether they're staying at a hostel or a hotel. It's always possible to just find a bad apple amongst a lot of really great experiences.
Right. With the documentary, Alexandra Liss actually set up a lot of who our hosts were, but we got to Casablanca in Morocco, which I didn't really know much about. I was just kind of like, I'll just let her, make most of the arrangements. And when we got to Casablanca, I realized I was in a place that was a lot more dangerous than I was used to being. And we got to our host's place, and it was pretty minimal, and it was very different than what I'm used to. And we were definitely sleeping on the floor, but it was one of the best experiences. I mean, one of the best. So I think it sort of forces you to have an open mind and to think about things differently, which is actually the beauty of it.
It was a combination of the more social aspect of couch surfing experience where you can go to these group events and maybe meet people before you actually stay with them, combined with some of the actual like technical features on the website where you can see other people and ratings. That combination is what really made you feel comfortable ultimately going that route.
I think with couch surfing, with being hosted by someone, you have to just kind of dive in and try it. I mean, it's so different than what people are typically used to. Although Airbnb, I think, is creating like a new paradigm along with couch surfing that people are becoming more socially aware of and accepting of. Yeah, the reviews definitely help. I mean, people write really long, detailed reviews on couchsurfing, and the community is really excited to be really honest and transparent, I think, about their experiences. I mean, the reviews are about people. They're not about the place. They're about the experiences that people have with other people. So that definitely helps. And the profiles are really long too. People spend a lot of time like talking about the places that they've been and who they are and who they'd be stoked to meet and quotes that they love and anything really. So that's really neat too.
What other content could people expect to find in your book once it's been published?
So the book is a practical guide, as I said earlier, and it's what's great about it, I think, and timely right now is that it's everything from like some of the services that people may know about, like couch surfing and Airbnb and car sharing, like Get Around, to lesser known things that maybe don't even get wrapped into the sharing economy traditionally, like time banking or woofing. It takes you through 8 different areas of your life, like home and transportation and travel, and kind of breaks down a lot of the different services that are available and gives you creative ideas, tips, tricks, and tells a lot of stories about how to actually do that. It basically encompasses everything that we've learned, which is a lot.
It's really awesome. So what are some of the best experiences that you've had using any of these sharing economy services, a memorable experience, or just in terms of the service itself, which kind of do you find to be the best in your opinion?
More recently, I've been really interested in platforms for generosity because I think that generosity is really contagious. So couch surfing is definitely one. I also think that Airbnb is really good because it's pushing that message out there to more people, and more people are staying in other people's homes and they're having, more unique local experiences. All this stuff is opening up a mentality of flexibility and, kind of owning your life and living your dreams and living more passionately, I guess. So like on the front cover of the book, it says, travel and work from anywhere, connect with your neighbors, get paid for your free time, pay for your car, and live rent free. So those are some of the things that we talk about in the book. But I think the greater picture is that people aren't letting their stuff sit, and they're connecting through their stuff rather than their stuff like sort of defining them. I think that that's great.
So it seems to be increasing a lot of efficiencies as a result, right? Because instead of things just kind of lying dormant in a closet or, having an empty room just sit around, you can actually put that to good use and maybe prevent things from having to be made that can otherwise be shared. So it's helping to save resources, it's helping to increase access to things so people don't have to buy new things all the time. They can actually share things with other people.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it's really helping to push a kind of new paradigm, and I think what you mentioned there, like that's really the key takeaway from all of this, is that it is kind of opening people's minds to a new way of defining ownership, or a new way of defining happiness. Like what does it mean to be happy? Does it mean having a bunch of stuff, or does it mean being having access to experiences?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like that's what you've found through your experience doing this.
Yeah, I mean, we want access to whatever it is that we want at the time. We don't necessarily want the responsibilities of ownership. And I think that this is also creating more of a consciousness around the commons, which is another sort of positive externality of this, is that people are starting to see, oh yeah, I have extra space in my house, and my car does sit a lot of the time, and maybe I don't need this, fill in the blank, and I can give it to somebody else. I think it's transformational. And there are some issues. There are some things that are going on right now with the sharing economy, and it's definitely playing out in the press and in reality, which is that this is turning into not just micro entrepreneurship, but like entrepreneurship where people are, making their livelihoods from the sharing economy. So that starts to change things as well. Like once people, are driving other people around in their cars, or renting out their places, or renting additional places and renting out space, it switches things up a bit. But I think because of what's been created previously and this whole ideology that we're sharing like what we have, I think that that's actually going to be to business models and software models, and it's going to shake things up big time. It already is.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing it. So with some of the growing pains that have come out of the sharing economy has come increased attention from governments and regulators, and you mentioned the press, of course, likes to stir things up whenever they get an opportunity. What do you think about all of the different kinds of attention that the sharing economy has been getting from New York, New York City, San Francisco, and the state of California? I've heard of Lyft drivers getting like sting operations performed on them by police who want to try to give them a ticket for commercial driving without a license. What do you think about all of these different attacks really they're coming down on sharing economy entrepreneurs?
I think that there's a lot of stuff that needs to get worked out. We're basically changing things up and saying that people don't necessarily need to be, licensed or have medallions or be certified or whatever. And I think we're going to see a heck of a lot more of that, because with peer reviews and the ability to make our own decisions about how we transact and interact, there's not really a reason for a lot of this sort of overhead. And well, I shouldn't say there isn't a reason, but there's less there's less motivation, I guess, for that. So that's going to shake things up on the government side. That's going to shake things up on, industry side, lobbyists. I mean, everyone's going to have their say, and it does have to get worked out. I mean, people are earning like real income off of this, and it is changing things. So how do we have those conversations on a political level, on a social level, that works for more people, that works for everyone, like ideally.
It's a great point. And on the topic of moving that conversation forward, you are taking part in a conference in Oakland, a conference/hackathon called Living the New Economy Convergence. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm actually just helping to promote that. It's going to be, I think, a really great convergence of people talking about money and the sharing economy and the commons and, philosophically and also practically about, what's happening in a new economy that we can all be proud of and excited about. I think that there's some really great speakers, like Charles Eisenstein is speaking, and he's pretty well known. It should be great. The people that are putting it together are really at the center of this. Kendra is, doing Baybucks, and she's, working on alternative currencies, local currencies. So I think it's going to be really well put together and a great opportunity to kind of dive in and learn a lot more from the people that are on the ground doing it.
Awesome. Well, I am looking forward to seeing videos, at least if I can't attend myself. And for anybody who's interested in learning more about what you're working on, whether it's your book or if they're interested in going to this New Living Economy Convergence, do you have some URLs handy to share with people so they know where to go and find information about that stuff?
Yeah, so as far as the book, it's shareablelife.com, just like it sounds. And for more information about me and the things that I'm thinking about on whatever day and whatever given day, it's my last name, which is Rustrum, rustrum.com. And then for the Bay Area Living the New Economy Conference, the URL is bayareaneweconomy.org. And it's October 23rd through the 26th in Oakland.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for coming on the show today, Chelsea, and best of luck with all of your adventures in the sharing economy.
Yeah, thanks, John. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 2 of the P2P Connects Us podcast. If you have any comments or questions, you can reach me through the contact page on my website at p2pconnects.us. Till next time.